supposed to protect citizens from a prosecutor or a judge or someone who would indict and bring someone to trial. It was supposed to be a buffer zone to keep us safe. If you've heard the old adage right now to do with a grand jury, the prosecutors all know it. You've heard it on news shows. They say that they can indict a ham sandwich. And that sounds a little funny, but the grand jury does not allow but one side of the story to be told. And most of the time they meet in secret, and that's to protect the identity of the ordinary citizens who make up the grand jury. But the citizen who's being indicted rarely knows it. I had no idea that a grand jury had been convened for the purpose of indicting me. And the fact that the prosecutor is allowed to tell only their side of the story without the defendant given an opportunity to present theirs. And you can be called before a grand jury because James Finch and I were both indicted multiple times after the first time. They kept submitting indictments which were proven to be facially insufficient, and they would find out what they did wrong, and then they would just re-indict us again, and they kept dropping charges and bringing charges back, and this process went on for years. And what I didn't understand is that once you're indicted, people say you're innocent until proven guilty. I had no idea what the process was. The day that I was indicted, and there were many, I'm just going to use the word lies. There were so many lies told about me in the indictment, which were proven to be lies. Of course, they called them misstatements in court, and they said they didn't do it on purpose, and they corrected them in later indictments. But there was only one witness in the indictment against me, and that was the FBI agent who said that I lied to him. And the person who questioned him was the assistant U.S. attorney, Stephen Kuntz, who had been let go in the Middle District because of bringing false evidence against a defendant. The Hyde Amendment in the Eisenberg case paid out the largest payout in federal history to the Eisenbergs because they said there were tapes that said that they had murdered their baby when they hadn't. Charges were dropped. And then this U.S. attorney is moved to the Northern District to prosecute again, even after he was excoriated by the Florida bar. He was reported on in the USA Today report about prosecutors. He was reported on in the Tallahassee Democrat. And that evidence would not be allowed in court. We couldn't even talk about that. He retired after our evidentiary hearing. We didn't see him anymore. He just suddenly retired. But he asked all the questions to the grand jury, to which, after we got the grand jury transcripts, because the judge allowed them to be opened, it was generally almost like a script. This U.S. attorney would ask this question to the FBI agent, who would answer correct, 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 over and over and over. But anyway, once you're indicted by a grand jury, then you have to appear before a judge. And the day of my indictment, I was arrested early in the morning, and I sat in a cell for hours in shackles. I had to answer questions to the federal marshal and to the judge's pretrial officer about an array of things: where I had traveled, what drugs I used, what prior criminal history I had. And I said, don't I need a lawyer with me to answer questions? And you're not permitted a lawyer. You have to answer their questions to be permitted to appear before the judge to see if you can be released. And I didn't know what I was charged with. They knew, but I didn't know. And I sat all day long, and when I was finally brought before the judge, the federal magistrate judge, to hear what the charges were, they waited purposefully until 3 o'clock Eastern Time to bring me before the judge, at the same exact time that U.S. Attorney Larry Keefe was doing a press conference at 2 o'clock Central in Panama City. He and Stephen Kuntz and Tommy Ford and the FBI agent from Jacksonville, Rachel Rojas, the four of them stood on the stage. And what they said about me, they used, it was right after COVID, and they used the word virus several times. Larry Keefe, we found out, had a publicist, Sachs Media, that he hired and used $455,000 of federal money in a budget to publicize what he did as the U.S. attorney, to promote himself and the activities of his office, which is not legal for a federal office to do that, what I was told by our attorneys. Tommy Ford, who knew that I was the whistleblower, never mentioned that. And when he spoke, he said that this individual took advantage of the residents of Bay County at their most vulnerable moment. Those were his words. And they talked about corrupt officials. It was just devastating to hear that. It was absolutely devastating. And to know that that press conference lasted an hour, 60 minutes, to wipe out 60 years of a life well lived. And after they did that, then I had to be arraigned again in Tallahassee, the Northern District where I was charged. And when I appeared before that magistrate, at that point I was assigned a pretrial officer, which is the same thing as a probation officer. I had to surrender my passport. I no longer had Second Amendment rights, and I could not even travel from Jacksonville to Lynn Haven without permission and had to give notice to travel. So I had this same pretrial officer who I will say was, she was female, she was very businesslike, very police officer-like, but as 36 months finally went by that she was my pretrial officer and she followed the case, I know that she knew what was going on, and she was very kind to me. She never crossed any lines of friendship or anything like that. I wouldn't say anything to cause her a problem because she never did anything that was not official. But she was very kind to me, and she was very professional at the same time. Then, after the sentence hearing, you're transferred to a probation officer. So I have not been able to get in my car and drive without permission for over 4 years. That finally ended last week. So think about that before you even go to trial. Everything's taken away from you. Think about it, your family. My mother, during all this, suffered a massive heart attack, and I lost her 7 months into it. My brother, who is so close to me, he's a physician, we have such a close relationship. It was devastating to him. He was in a building that was destroyed, a hospital here, and had to evacuate with his patients after Hurricane Michael, and he lived in another community down around Tampa for 6 months and with his patients in another hospital. He treats active military duty patients. And my daughter, my grandchildren, you know, when you learn that somebody that close to you has been indicted on 64 counts, I even wondered, I think my own family wondered, you know, how egregious this was. And I look back to that first indictment of Michael White and the others when I was named in an indictment but not charged about 9 months before I was actually indicted. After those FBI agents came that night to my house and questioned me in the dark of night with no warning, without telling me that it was official and that a statement could be used against me, when I was named the next morning, I called Sheriff Tommy Ford, and I was sobbing on the phone. And I said, "Tommy, what in the world? How could I be named in this indictment?" I said, what is happening? And he said very curtly to me, "The FBI agents said you were not forthcoming in your interview with them." And I said, "Forthcoming about what?" And he said, "I'm not going to get in a three-way conversation with you about the FBI." And I said, I want to talk with you again. I want to tell you whatever you need to know. What do I need to clarify? He was very curt, and he said he would let them know, and he hung up, and I never heard from him again. Once I was indicted, I was given a list of no contacts. I was not allowed to attend a Lynn Haven City Commission meeting. I was not allowed to talk to an employee. I was not allowed to talk to the other commissioners. I was not allowed to talk to my dear friend, James Finch, for almost 9 months. When he was indicted, we were finally co-defendants, and at that point we got permission. all the people who had accused me, all the people who had told lies. I watched Dan Russell, who became the mayor pro tem, sit at commission meetings and smirk and talk about this mayor, and knowing that he had signed the contract that I didn't sign. I can't tell you how that wore on me and how painful that was. And I think about the presidents of the United States, how people sort of joke about how they've been in office 4 years and how it ages them and how they don't sleep. And I don't look like the same person that I was when this happened 4 years ago. And I think about all that was taken from me and the injustice of it. And I remember reading what Nelson Mandela said when he walked out of prison in South Africa. And he said, if I can't forgive this and I can't move on from this when I walk out of these doors, I will always be in prison. And I thought those were such powerful words. And when I think about what these people who were responsible for what happened to me did, it's such pure evil. To destroy another person's life, to take their life, knowing that that person committed no crimes, to cover your own crimes, to cover the things that you know have happened, that is unforgivable. It is unforgivable. And people cannot even understand what it's like for month after month after month not to sleep, to be anxious, wondering what's going to happen next, what your future is going to be, the financial distress. I lost my home. We went through our savings, and then I had, thankfully for me, a friend who was very wealthy, who was willing to fight for me. But because of that, I believe because he fought for me is why he was indicted. I will always believe that. So this has not been a happy story, but I will tell you this, that I've always been a Christian since I was a little girl. And when I say a Christian, I don't mean that I just go to church every Sunday. I mean I've had a relationship with Jesus Christ. And my faith in him got me through this. And sometimes I was so devastated and so hopeless that I couldn't even pray. And I would just whisper his name. I would just say, Jesus, Jesus. And on the day that the plea was offered to me, and after I thought about it for a while, and I thought about the fact that God had opened this door for me, he set me free. And I don't know why this happened to me. I don't believe that evil comes from God, but I know that God has the power to get us through it. And I think that when it's all said and done, that something very good will come from all of this. And I hope that the people who perpetrated this, I hope that at some point that they find redemption, that they ask for redemption, and that they don't do this to anyone else ever again. The cruelty is unimaginable.